I stood on the front porch of my childhood home, locked out not just of the house, but of the life I once belonged to. My parents handed over their $11 million estate to my half-sister and erased me like I was never their daughter. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. Everyone said, "Let it go, Megan," but I wasn't raised to bow down to injustice. If they thought I'd vanish quietly, they didn't know me at all. What they didn't expect was the plan I had already set in motion. My name is Megan Avery. I'm 30 years old, a senior communications strategist based in Atlanta. If you'd met me a year ago, you'd probably say I had it all together, calm, composed, endlessly diplomatic. I was the kind of person who sent birthday cards early, who kept everyone's secrets, who remembered how each cousin took their coffee. I was the glue in a family that never really wanted to stick. Growing up, my world was a tug of war between appearances and emotional landmines. My dad, Charles Avery, was a well-respected real estate mogul in Georgia, stoic, commanding, rarely warm. My mom, Helen, was a socialite turned homemaker who cared more about maintaining an image than nurturing real connection. They were the kind of people who hosted charity galas, but never once said "I love you" without a camera nearby. And then there was Ava. Ava was my half-sister. 10 years younger, the product of a brief affair my father had, while still married to my mom. But when the other woman passed away, suddenly, my parents surprisingly took Ava in. She moved into our house when I was 16. I remember the day she arrived, clutching a teddy bear like her life depended on it. She looked fragile, lost, and I, being the older sister, did what no one else in the family thought to do. I held her hand. I spent years playing peacekeeper between my mom's silent resentment and Ava's confused loyalty. I'd braid Ava's hair before school, help her with her essays, and shield her from my mother's passive-aggressive comments. Even when Ava became the golden child in my parents' eyes, I never let jealousy take root. I believed love didn't divide, it multiplied. I was wrong. By the time Ava was in college, my parents had completely shifted. Suddenly, it was Ava at every family dinner's spotlight. Ava getting flown out to Europe for educational trips. Ava, whose graduation got a $50,000 party, while mine had been a homemade cake and a handshake. Still, I told myself they just wanted to make up for her difficult childhood. I held on to the belief that deep down they loved us both. I worked hard to earn my own way. After college, I landed a job in PR and climbed fast, partly because I was good, mostly because I couldn't afford to fail. My parents helped Ava buy her first apartment. I rented mine and lived paycheck to paycheck for the first 5 years. They called Ava their second chance. I was their first draft edited out. But through it all, I never complained. I visited every holiday, brought thoughtful gifts, checked in on them weekly. I was the daughter who showed up. When Dad had his first heart scare, it was me who took time off to sit in the hospital. When Mom had surgery, I coordinated every detail of her recovery. Ava, ever the Instagram entrepreneur, sent flowers and posted about it online. Despite the imbalance, I kept telling myself that loyalty would count for something in the end. That belief shattered one afternoon in March. I was driving home from work when I got a call from my father's longtime lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. His voice was stiff, apologetic. "Megan?" He said, "I thought you should hear it from me before the papers go public. Your parents have finalized their estate. Everything real estate investments, personal belongings, is going to Ava." I pulled over my hands, shaking. What do you mean, everything? He sighed. They've also made legal motions to restrict your access to any family properties. I'm truly sorry. I advised them against it, but I hung up before he finished. I thought it was some kind of mistake. A misunderstanding. Surely they would explain. They didn't. When I called, no one picked up. When I showed up at their house, the house I grew up in, I was met with new locks and a security guard who told me politely but firmly that I was not on the approved list. My name, my history, my existence erased. Even Ava didn't answer. She ghosted me like I was some internet troll. I didn't cry. Not then, not even later. I sat in my car for nearly 2 hours outside that gate, replaying every memory I had ever had with them. Every birthday I never missed. Every sacrifice. Every quiet apology I whispered on their behalf to myself, just to keep believing they cared. The truth was loud now. I wasn't disinherited. I was discarded. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The Megan who always made peace, who kept her head down, who forgave silently, she didn't survive that driveway. What rose from the ashes was someone else. Not bitter, not vengeful, strategic. I spent the next 3 days in a fog. Emails went unanswered. Calls sent straight to voicemail. I even tried reaching out to Ava on social media, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd explain. Instead, I saw her newest post, a photo of her standing in front of our family estate, smiling under the caption, "Home sweet, inherited home, wow, grateful, blessed." The betrayal hit like a second slap. Not just the money, not just the house, but the complete erasure of me from the family, from their legacy, from their lives. Still, I needed answers. Closure at the very least. I tried the only other route I had left, Mr. Reynolds, the lawyer. I scheduled a meeting at his office downtown, wearing my most professional, unbothered face. Inside, he greeted me like I was a fragile package about to break. "I want to see the will," I said flatly. He hesitated, then pulled out a thick folder. I read each page slowly, my fingers trembling only once, when I got to the clause that stated, "All assets, including real estate holdings, savings, stocks, and heirlooms to be transferred to Ava Callahan. Megan Avery shall have no claim or entitlement, no claim, no entitlement." Why, I asked. My voice cracked for the first time. Mr. Reynolds looked uncomfortable. "Your parents indicated concerns. They believe you've become emotionally distant, focused on your career, and unwilling to support the family's personal priorities." I let out a bitter laugh. "You mean I wasn't posting about them on Instagram?" He didn't answer. "They also mentioned a desire to keep the estate within the bloodline closest to your father," he added gently. The word bloodline made my stomach turn. I was his daughter. I am his daughter. When I left the office, I wasn't angry. I was hollow. I had spent years believing I could earn love, loyalty, fairness. That if I gave enough, stayed kind enough, patient enough, I'd be enough. But now I saw it clearly. My parents hadn't just chosen Ava. They had rewritten the story, so I never existed in it. The fallout was swift. Within a week, extended family started pulling away. My Aunt Deborah, once a close confidant, stopped responding to texts. My cousin Jenna, who used to vent to me for hours, suddenly unfollowed me online. Rumors swirled whispers that I had turned my back on the family, that I was ungrateful, even unstable. The final blow came at my friend Emily's engagement party. Ava showed up uninvited by me wearing our mother's vintage sapphire necklace. the one passed down through generations, the one I was promised on my 13th birthday. She walked in like royalty, kissed cheeks, laughed too loudly. When she saw me, she gave a tight smile and said, "Didn't think I'd come. Thought I might be too busy managing $11 million." A few people chuckled awkwardly. I didn't. I just stared at my necklace sitting smugly on her chest. "You're enjoying this," I said quietly. She shrugged. "It's not my fault they chose me." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about erasure. Ava had stepped into the role I'd built for years, and everyone was letting her do it, no questions asked. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, staring at an unopened bottle of wine and the family photo I kept on my desk. Mom-Dad me at age 10 on a beach in Florida. I realized I was the only one holding on to that version of us. They had already let go. So I started digging. Not for dirt, but for patterns, for clarity, for truth. I went through old emails, texts, photos, even voicemail transcriptions. I looked for signs of when the shift began, when I started becoming less than in their eyes. And I found them. Photos from Ava's high school graduation with captions from my parents, calling her their greatest blessing. Texts where my mom complained to her sister about how I was too career-driven and not maternal enough. Even old financial statements that showed Ava had been getting monthly transfers for years while I'd been too proud to ever ask. They had been phasing me out slowly, deliberately, while I kept showing up clueless and devoted. That clarity hurt more than the betrayal itself. I stopped reaching out. I didn't text on birthdays. I skipped Father's Day. I didn't send my usual Christmas card, and no one noticed. Not a single call asking where I was. I could have disappeared entirely, and to them, it would have been a relief. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you power. They thought they broke me. They thought silence meant surrender. But the silence was just strategy. Because while they celebrated their illusion of a perfect family, I was already laying the groundwork to expose every lie, every manipulation, every thread of favoritism they'd ever sown. And I wasn't going to shout it in a courtroom. I was going to broadcast it strategically, publicly, and in a way they couldn't erase. Grief has a way of sneaking up on you, not as a wave, but a slow, tightening thread that winds around your chest until you forget what breathing used to feel like. That's what it felt like the weeks after Ava flaunted her inheritance at Emily's engagement party. I returned home to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that buzzes in your ears like an accusation. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped cooking. My apartment grew stale, leftover takeout, unopened mail, clothes, still folded in baskets. I worked from home, barely turning my camera, faking smiles with clients, while something inside me cracked. But even in that darkness, I couldn't forget who I was. I was a communicator. I had spent my career shaping narratives, helping others tell their truth. It was time I used that for myself. Not for revenge. At least, not at first. But to reclaim the voice they stole from me. It started as a journal entry. I wrote a blog post titled, "When Your Family Writes You Out of the Will and the Narrative." It wasn't dramatic. It didn't name names. Just the story of a woman who gave everything to her family and was repaid with silence and erasure. I posted it anonymously on Medium, shared it in a few Reddit communities. Then I went to bed. The next morning, it had 3,000 views. By day 3, it was over 50,000. The comments stunned me. Hundreds of women, many with step-siblings, many raised to please, many discarded. The moment they outgrew the role of caretaker or scapegoat, were pouring their hearts out. This is my life too. Thank you for saying what I've never been able to. I'm crying because I thought I was alone. For the first time in months, I felt something close to purpose. I wrote more. Weekly posts turned into serialized storytelling. I explored my family's subtle manipulations, the coded language of conditional love, the way wealth becomes a weapon when placed in the wrong hands. Each post resonated deeper. Then came the email. A woman named Camille, a journalist for a popular digital magazine, messaged me asking if I'd be willing to share my story publicly. She said my blog had been making quiet waves in media circles, and she wanted to help amplify it. I hesitated. Going public meant more than attention. It meant exposure. It meant war. But I was already at war. Camille interviewed me over Zoom. I told her everything. My upbringing, Ava's sudden rise, the betrayal, the will, the silence. She was sharp, compassionate, and direct. A week later, her piece went live, The Invisible Daughter. How one woman was written out of her own family. It exploded. By noon, it was trending. By evening, I was fielding emails from talk shows, podcasts, even 2 documentary producers. My inbox became a war zone, supportive strangers, judgmental trolls, and eventually, my parents. They didn't call. They emailed. Subject line, enough. It was from my mother. Cold-clipped corporate. Megan, you've made your point. We are disappointed you chose this path. We ask that you cease all public storytelling related to our family immediately. This isn't who you are. Please consider the long-term consequences of your actions. No apology, no explanation. Just control, one last attempt to pull the puppet strings. I didn't respond. Because something else had arrived in my inbox that same hour, a message from a woman named Sarah Klein, a high-profile attorney who specialized in estate litigation and emotional abuse within families. She'd read Camille's piece and believed I had a case. Not just morally, but legally. Your parents made a public decision with lasting consequences, she said, and they did so with a pattern of behavior that could be challenged under Georgia law, especially if there's evidence of coercion or mental distress. Let's talk. We did. For 5 hours, I shared everything. Texts, voicemails, timelines, Ava's financial history. Sarah built a timeline so clean it made my skin crawl. The favoritism hadn't started last year. It began when Ava was 13. I was 19 in college, working 2 jobs. Meanwhile, Ava got her first car, a brand new BMW. I never thought much of it. My parents said it was because they had more money then. They had more love then, too. Sarah filed a formal suit. Within 2 weeks, Megan Avery versus the Avery family estate. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about systemic erasure, emotional damage, and the misuse of familial power to punish a daughter who simply didn't fit their mold. And then everything blew up. Ava posted a video. It was some low-quality TikTok of her crying mascara running saying I was destroying the family and lying for clout. She called me a bitter stepsister and claimed my blog was fiction dressed up as truth. Big mistake. because her video included a detail she shouldn't have known, something I had only mentioned in a private text to my mom years ago. That was proof Ava and my parents had been conspiring behind the scenes for far longer than I thought. Sarah added defamation to the case. I lost friends. Some people said I should have handled it privately, but they didn't see the years of erasure, the slow death of identity, the quiet ways families exile you without ever saying the words. I wasn't fighting for $11 million. I was fighting for the version of me that used to believe she mattered, and no inheritance could measure up to that. The case dragged for months. Depositions, mediation, discovery. My father refused to appear in person. My mother wept performatively over Zoom. Ava wore sunglasses to our court-ordered arbitration, like she was shielding herself from accountability. But Sarah was relentless. She showed the years of favoritism. She presented financial records. She brought in a psychologist to explain the trauma of familial erasure, and finally, a judge ruled that we would proceed to court. That night, I stood in my apartment, same spot where I once stared at my old family photo and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. Not for revenge, for justice, for my story to finally be mine. The court date was set for mid-November. That gave us 90 days to prepare and 90 days to dismantle the lie my family had built around me. Sarah and I weren't just playing defense anymore. We had strategy. The first move, depositions. Ava was forced to sit across from Sarah under oath and answer questions she'd never expected to face. She stuttered when asked about how she knew personal details from my private texts. She claimed she overheard it once, but Sarah showed her a transcript from a deleted message exchange between Ava and my mother, messages that referenced me word for word. Ava's lawyer visibly cringed. Then came the subpoena for financial records. Sarah traced the movement of estate funds, millions funneled into Ava's new wellness brand, which had 0 clients and only 1 employee, her boyfriend. It was all smoke and mirrors. The second move was public perception. I had kept my blog anonymous, but once the case went public, so did my name. I decided to embrace it. I appeared on a nationally syndicated podcast to discuss the emotional trauma of being disinherited and silenced. I wasn't vengeful. I spoke as a woman, reclaiming her identity, a woman tired of being erased. The episode went viral. Within days, a producer for a docuseries on family estrangement reached out. They wanted to follow my case. Sarah advised we wait, but the fact that they asked was proof my narrative was resonating. Then the third move, character witnesses. I didn't think I had many, but turns out people remember how you make them feel. Former teachers, childhood friends, even a neighbor who once comforted me after a fight with my mom, all agreed to submit statements. My parents had burned more bridges than they realized. Sarah presented our evidence with surgical precision timelines, financials, digital communications, therapy records, and a video testimonial I had filmed explaining how this experience shaped me. And then came the karma. A whistleblower. One of Ava's former assistants, someone I had never met, contacted Sarah. She had been hired under the table and was asked to fabricate client testimonials for Ava's company. She had emails, recordings, receipts. That broke everything open. What started as an emotional justice case now had fraud implications. The IRS got involved, investigations widened, Ava's business accounts were frozen, her boyfriend disappeared from social media. My parents. They went radio silent. The pressure mounted. Sarah prepared our closing argument calm and devastating. I sat in the gallery, hands clenched, heart steady. Then just 2 days before the trial, my parents offered a settlement. 7 figures. A formal apology. A signed affidavit admitting their actions. I said no. Because money wasn't the goal. Not anymore. I wanted the truth to be public. Sarah smiled. Then let's finish this. We walked into court heads high. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the woman who chose truth over comfort. And I was just getting started. When the judge ruled in my favor, awarding me a significant share of the estate and condemning my parents' actions as a clear case of undue influence and familial discrimination, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. For the first time in years, I stood without the weight of trying to be the daughter they wanted. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was standing tall in my truth. Rachel. My half-sister avoided eye contact the entire hearing. Her lawyers had scrambled to protect her, but her silence spoke louder than any statement. In the end, she kept some of her inheritance, but she would never escape the stain of what had come to light. Her future in the social scene she had so carefully crafted began to crumble. Brands pulled sponsorships. Friends distanced themselves. The truth always has a way of catching up. As for my parents, they left the courtroom quietly, their legacy forever tarnished, not by scandal, but by cruelty. I didn't want revenge anymore. What I wanted was peace, and I found it. I started a podcast called The Uninvited Daughter, where I spoke openly about being excluded, erased, and eventually empowered. My first episode went viral. Women wrote to me in droves, daughters, disinherited wives, abandoned mothers forgotten. I wasn't alone anymore, and neither were they. Justice to me wasn't just the money. It was reclaiming my voice. It was standing in the rubble of what my family destroyed and building something real, something mine. So no, I didn't get my parents back, but I found something better. I found myself.